Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. With Inktober just around the corner, I thought it'd be super fun to try and do a few of the topics and try and turn it into a digital painting. I looked at the prompt list, which you can find on the official Instagram for Inktober, and I want to start with the first one. I don't think I'll be able to do all of them, but I want to try at least a few of them. And I quite like the topic of ring. There's a lot of fun ways you can approach this, but to me I was thinking like a girl maybe sitting in a pool, and you know those plastic donuts just sitting there relaxing, very like Caribbean feel, much like a holiday. I was talking a lot to my wife about how I want us to travel to Hawaii one day eventually. So that was kind of the influence for the whole thing before I even started. But let's start inking, shall we? So I started with a very loose graphite drawing underneath, just to kind of give some landmarks of where I want certain things. And I'm trying to keep a lot of the palm trees and a lot of the details very suggestive. Because I know at the end I'm going to go into Photoshop, so it's more like a guide of what information I need to be able to paint it later. And I'm trying to go across the whole image, and I like to use, my ink pen that I use is 0.5, the thickness of the pen tip. And I like working with thicker ink pens. It's just a personal preference, because whenever I feel like working with smaller ones, you end up not seeing as much visual detail that I like. And I think there's something about thicker ink pen that just makes it more pleasing to look at. The only time I switched it up in the image itself was when I wanted to try and emphasize a bit of depth. I took a smaller ink pen when I wanted to paint in or draw in some of the clouds that are further away in the image. In the end, we're gonna paint it in Photoshop, but I thought it'd be cool just to block it in the sketchbook itself, just to kind of give some suggestions of it. When I was done with that, I felt like it was time to do the brush pen. This is probably my favorite part of the ink sketching. It's very easy to go overboard. There's a lot of ink in this pen, and oftentimes I end up adding too many shadows and it just looks like a mess. I've seen people do incredible stuff with it, which is really inspiring, but I'm just trying to get just enough information to work off of it. I think with that we're getting pretty close to wrapping the sketch up, so let's move on to the next step. This is where I ended up with my ink sketches. This was some earlier exploration of some different camera angles and some more texture on the donut, but I figured it would get too noisy. I also tried exploring some palm trees, but I kind of ran out of space. I couldn't quite explore as much as I wanted. But for me, this layout has all the information that I need to jump into the digital painting. And I have a lot of space to work around below her. I probably want some extra space on the side, but it's easier to tweak that in Photoshop. But let's start painting, shall we? I ended up going and doing some adjustments to the drawing, and the original sketch, you can see very thinly, it's below everything that I put into the Photoshop file, and I reduced the opacity on it so I could draw on top of it and do the adjustments that I talked about earlier, or extend a bit of space to the right, and some other adjustments to the image. But for now, let's paint the clouds. I always try to paint clouds first because they're far away in the image. I try to make them feel as fluffy and as creamy as possible, because to me, like, I really like to show contrast between different elements in the image, and especially when you have clouds, they're usually really puffy. So if you can make them feel really soft, you really contrast well against other elements in your image and just create a more difference of feel of your painting. And whenever I'm done with the cloud, I move on to the next thing that's further off in the image, which are like mountains. And I also want to show a bit of horizontal line, because in my mind I was thinking that she was sitting in sort of an infinity pool. I'll show some reference of what that could look like. Kind of looks like there's almost no edge. It looks super cool. It looks a bit surreal, but I really like the look of it, and that's kind of the intention I was thinking. Maybe she's sitting somewhere there. And whenever I felt more comfortable with the background, that's when I move on to the character. Usually I'll leave it to the later part of my process, but because in this painting the character is so close to us in the camera, I wanted to jump onto it earlier than I usually would, because I knew it was going to be a bigger part of the image. So adding that extra time and detail on her would just bring the whole image together a bit more. And working on the sunglasses as well, I wanted to make sure in this painting that I pushed a bit more material feel in the elements of the image. Mainly the sunglasses and the donut itself, to really make the sunglasses feel a bit shiny and have some reflection in it, and the donut to make it feel like really plasticky. Because to me, that's whenever I look at those inflatable donuts, they just have such a nice foamy feel to it that I want to try and capture in the painting as well. And I use a lot of airbrush for this because I prefer to work with more texture brushes, but to give a more plasticky feel, more realistic feel, I'm going to need more softer gradation in the image, so I can't really have hard transition unless I ended up blurring it. Except where we have the seam and the donut itself, that's when we can get a bit harder. And whenever I feel more comfortable or not sure what to work on something in an image, like I felt like there's things I want to work more on the character, but I wasn't quite sure what things to focus on first, I like to jump onto the other parts of the image. And in this phase, I felt like the palm trees could use a bit more detail and create some more overlaps within itself by adding some more highlights in it of brighter leaves. I felt the reflections also could use a bit more work. It didn't felt quite like it was causing proper reflections, so I went in, added some more tiny highlights like ripples because she's in the water, she's moving around. It's going to be some more ripples in the water. It's not going to be as clean as previously. It makes it feel more natural if we add those in as well. I also decided after I was done with that, I want to go back and I realized there were certain things in the image that I've forgotten. One thing I completely forgot to show her stomach, so I ended up painting that in. I felt like it sat much better in the image once I painted that in as well. And ended up doing some adjustments across the image as a whole, but with that I'm pretty close to wrapping it up. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun for me, and I hope I'm going to be able to do more of the Inktober topics. I'm also curious, are you going to take part in the Inktober challenge? I also put up an episode each Friday, so if you subscribe you'll be notified when it comes out. Also want to wish you a happy Friday and a wonderful weekend. See you next time. Bye.